So for the longest time now, we've been seeing these clips from Trump rallies, and they're just so depressing because the guy is just constantly running down our country, constantly insulting everyone that he and Maga disagrees with, coming up with ridiculous catchphrases and nicknames for everybody. And it's just so over the top Jerry Springer that reasonable people are sick of that act, and they're wanting to see something that gives us hope. And a lot of us have been longing for that kind of 2008 Barack Obama energy that we had back then. And now we're starting to see it again ever since Vice President Kamala Harris picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. The excitement is back in the air, and I'm so glad to see people on our side of the fence unified and understanding what's ahead of us. I'm also very glad to see Kamala Harris calling out Donald Trump for who he is and what he's done and what he vows to do, because the mainstream media has tried for so long now to say that we need to turn down the temperature in the room now, we need to tone things down. It wasn't us that cranked it up. It wasn't us that threatened to be a dictator. It wasn't us that threatened to terminate the Constitution. It wasn't us that went to the Capitol and tried to overthrow an election that we knew we lost. It was them, and I'm really glad that Harris is not letting that go and reminding people of the threat that Trump does pose to our democracy. Take a look at this.
The fact that last month, the United States Supreme Court basically told the former president, who has been convicted of fraud, that going forward, he will be immune no matter what he does in the White House. Think about what that means and the changed circumstances since 16/6/20 when you think about what that court decision means. Donald Trump has openly vowed if reelected, he will be a dictator on day one. That he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. That he would round up peaceful protesters and throw them out of our country. And even, quote, terminate the United States Constitution. So let us be clear. Let us be clear. Someone who suggests we should terminate the Constitution of the United States should never again have a chance to stand behind the seal of the President of the United States.
You know, you really got to stop and think. When the Supreme Court gave presidents full immunity for official acts, they were doing it for Donald Trump. They were doing it because for the first time in history, a former president was crying, but I have to have full immunity in order to be able to do my job. So it was a favor to Donald Trump. They weren't doing that for Joe Biden. They weren't doing it because Joe Biden was asking for it. And they knew that Donald Trump had been found guilty of fraud. They knew he'd been found liable of sexual abuse. They didn't care. So that tells you everything you need to know about them. But what I love about Harris's rallies is, yeah, from time to time there's hecklers, and from time to time there's people that will chant things like lock him up. And rightfully so. But I love the way Harris handles these type of situations. Daylight and dark from a Trump rally. Take a look.
I know Donald Trump's tight. I know it's tight. In fact, I've been dealing with people like him my whole career. For example, as Attorney General of California, well, hold on. You know what? The courts are going to handle that part of it. What we're going to do is beat them in November.
Notice she didn't start leading the chant of lock him up. You know, Donald Trump is like a WWE villain or a babyface making their comeback. They hear the crowd starting to rumble and they start trying to work the crowd into a frenzy. That's what Donald Trump has done anytime that situation's come up at one of his rallies. He waits for one moment that he can pounce on to get the crowd even more worked up. But Kamala Harris just says, no, we're going to beat him come November. We're going to let the courts handle that, and we're going to beat him come November. And what I also love about these rallies that I'm seeing from Harris and Walz is that they're based in reality. They're not sitting and running down the country. They're not talking about everything that's wrong with us, but they are admitting, hey, we still got a lot of work to do. This next clip, when I saw this, I thought, you know, I've never heard Trump say anything remotely close to this. When he talks, it's always about how great he was, how the country was better than ever, how it's going to be better than ever on day one. He never actually faced up to the issues at hand or faced up to problems we were having. And Kamala Harris has no problem doing that, and I love her for it. Take a look.
Because while our economy is doing well by many measures, prices for everyday things like groceries are still too high. You know it and I know it. You know, when I was Attorney General, I went after price-fixing schemes. And when I am president, it will be a day-one priority to fight to bring down prices. I will take on big corporations that engage in illegal price gouging. I will take on corporate landlords that unfairly raise rents on working families. I will take on big pharma and cap the cost of prescription drugs for all Americans. Continue to bring manufacturing jobs back to America and back to communities like Eau Claire.
Now, can you imagine Donald Trump ever saying that times were tough while he was in office, or saying that times could possibly be tough if he were to be reelected? He doesn't do that. He just talks about how great he is, how wonderful things are. Kamala Harris is saying, hey, we got a lot of work to do. There's still work to be done. There's still problems we're facing today, and I plan on going to work to fix those problems on day one. Not, I'll be a dictator if I have to be, and I'll terminate the Constitution in order to get it done. That's the difference between the two sides. And man, am I loving Tim Walz as the pick for VP. No, he wasn't my first choice. I was an Andy guy, but I'm not disappointed at all. We had so many good choices on our side, and I have to hand it to Vice President Kamala Harris. She definitely picked the right guy, because he is all over it in these clips, folks. Take a look.
Now, look, we're pretty neighborly with Wisconsin. We get our friendly battles, but in Minnesota, just like in Wisconsin, we respect our neighbors and the personal choices they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choices for ourselves, because we know there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. Mind your own damn business. I don't need you telling me about our health care. I don't need you telling us who we love. And I sure the hell don't need you telling us what books we're going to read.
You know, folks, I remember a time when the Republican Party was all about limited government, and they were all about the government staying out of our personal lives. And now they're all about the government dictating every single move of our life, down to what books our kids reads. So it's funny to me when I watch that clip, I say to myself, you know, if this had been 15 years ago, you could have passed that off as a Republican. But you can't now, because of how far Maga has took the Republican Party into the extreme. And what is going to be so hilarious to watch is when Tim Walz debates J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is going to be a complete and total lost ball in high weeds. And I love the fact that Tim Walz is witty and can give it back to him. Take a look at this. This is epic.
I can't wait to debate the guy. That is if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there?
That was priceless. And what's so funny is that J.D. Vance, in his book Hillbilly Elegy, brags about how he stood up to bullies. He took up for this kid at school who he saw being unjustly bullied. But yet now he's running alongside the biggest bully that there is, and he's adopting his act and using that bully act to literally stalk Vice President Kamala Harris's plane. No, I'm not making this up. Take a look.
We're covering the Vice President here. I figured I'd come by and one, just get a good look at the plane, because hopefully it's going to be my plane in a few months. But I also thought you guys might get lonely because the Vice President doesn't answer questions from reporters and hasn't for 17 days. Have they given you guys an explanation for why she won't take questions from reporters?
Yeah, that's not going to be his plane. The only reason he walked over there is because he realizes that's the closest he's ever going to come to it. But the guy is absolutely ridiculous, standing there saying, she won't take questions, I take the tough questions. I've never seen J.D. Vance take a tough question. Have you? Have you ever seen Donald Trump take a tough question? No, they just sit there. If they get a tough question, they look and say, well, how mean you are being to me. I came here to do you a favor and sit down and talk with you. I've never been talked to like this in my life. So I don't know why he's trying to say that Kamala Harris won't take questions when I've never really heard him take one and answer it honestly. And Fox News now is completely lost. They don't know what to do with this because they've been doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down on their Joe Biden rhetoric for so long that now they're trying to come up with something new to talk about Harris and Walz. And they got Walz and they're scared to death because now their back's against the wall, no pun intended, or pun intended. And now they realize, oh, we got to come up with some catchy names. What can we do? And the best that these morons can do is come up with Twitchy Tim. This is real life, folks. I'm sorry to say. Take a look.
Here's Twitchy Tim on stage waving profusely in a very unsettling manner, very unsettling. Men should not move this way. It's not the way we move. And the handshake is probably the most telling. This is Walz and his wife shaking hands like business associates, followed by a weird hug. Now let's compare that to Walz's interaction with Kamala's husband, Doug. Interesting. What's going on here?
Wow.
You know, all I would say to Tim Walz about that is, buddy, you know you made it when the only thing they can find to pick at you is the way you wave at a crowd or the way that you shake someone's hand or the way that you laugh. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. But that's the best they can do, Twitchy Tim. You know why they have to come up with stuff like that? Because they don't have no ideas or solutions. They don't have any way of going about fixing the problem, but our side does, and that's why we're here, and that's why we're going to vote come November. Folks, it's going to be glorious to watch Donald Trump lose, but we have to keep our eye on the ball and we have to stay focused. We still got a ways to go. We can all get excited, but we have to keep that excitement. We have to keep it right down to the bitter end because there's too much at stake not to. Don't get complacent. Don't rest on your laurels. Now's not the time for that. Yeah, she's doing great in the polls. Trump is coming completely unhinged and unglued. Vance is coming so far off the rails, he's running around looking for a plane. I mean, they're falling apart right in front of our face. But whenever, going back to my boxing analogies, whenever a fighter is on the hook, meaning you've caught him with a good punch, you don't back up and you don't give him room to retreat. You have to. That's the moment where you go in, you stay focused, and you win the fight. And that's what we have to do come November, and we're going to do it. And then we're going to sit back and try to pick up the pieces from all this. And we will be picking up the pieces with reasonable ideas and solutions. And the Jesse Waters of the world will be calling somebody twitchy because, folks, at the end of the day, that's all they got.